Ad agencies are good at three things: building brands, driving sales, and making employees so miserable they would prefer to be literally anywhere else, almost as soon as they're hired. Hence the industry-wide 33% turnover rate. The James agency in Scottsdale is quite good at the first two, but has failed miserably at the third. Many of their folks have stuck around for over 10 years.
Meow, meow.
The CCO has been there since the beginning, 20 years,
Meow, meow.
with agency founder and today's guest on the DesuckifyWork podcast, Veronique James, known simply as V to most. So what's V doing wrong? Why is she struggling to live up to the precedent set by so many in our industry? I guess she didn't get the memo. You know, the one that says you should keep business details shrouded in secrecy, even from your top leaders. The one that says accountability is too scary and complicated. The one that says caring deeply about your clients and their business results isn't important. Just focus on the task at hand, brah. V has this nutty idea that having a team aligned around shared values can make the work better and make working better too. Values like give a shit, be yourself, aspire to be better, take action, contribute positivity, challenge convention, and communicate honestly.
Win the game before the game.
Values that allowed the agency to avoid layoffs or pay cuts during COVID and have led them to treat RFPs like actual projects instead of just dropping them into the workflow like methed up honey badgers. Does this kind of wackiness actually work? Could other agencies follow their lead and see similar results?
Embrace the freaking mundane.
Take a listen to V and see what you think. If you enjoy this episode, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's V. Okay, Veronique James, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. We're going to dive into a lot of good stuff. And before we do, I'll just give you a quick chance to introduce yourself. What do you do and how did you come to be doing it?
Yeah, so certainly first and foremost, call me V. Everybody does, including my family and my staff.
Will do.
I am founder and CEO of the James Agency. We're a 20-year integrated agency located in the heart of Scottsdale, Arizona. Really focusing on a lot of business to consumer, experiential, destination travel, food and beverage brands. We do also have some B2B. The agency started historically as a brand development firm 20 years ago, but has evolved into a white glove service agency that focuses on all facets of marketing from web, PR, social media, all facets of paid media. And we're about 45 staff, and it's a privilege to be a part of this incredible organization.
Ooh, nice. So white glove jumped out at me. What does the white glove experience mean for clients?
Yeah, I'll go back to my why of why I started the business. In my wee young years, when I was just a young tyke coming into the industry, I found that there was a kind of persistent friction between the agencies that I worked for and the clients that we had the privilege of serving. And really, you'll have to excuse me, I'm a little under the weather here, but what I was acknowledging in my early 20s is the friction was around lack of transparency and also not the client not feeling like they had a partner that was deeply invested in their business, seeking first to understand and being in the trenches. So I started the business during a time where I felt like there had to be a better way, specifically around the intent of let's let the client not only be in the passenger seat, but the driver's seat with us. Let's make sure from concept all the way to delivery and execution, we have a heavy hand in each step of the process. There's a really great book called How to Buy Back Your Time. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later today as well. But, that's our job, is to allow our clients to focus on the core of their business while we handle those complex marketing, opportunities and challenges. So that white glove service principle is around, really allowing the client to have trust and knowing that we're deeply invested in their business with that fundamental ethos of transparency so that they're not ever wondering where is their investment going or what are we working on, and that we're actually moving the needle for their business, not just providing vanity metrics, right? Because I think there's a lot of agencies out there who kind of provide fluff and say, look at what we're doing. But are we
Mhm.
really solving for those complex business challenges or objectives? I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I'm saying when I say are we, I'm talking about maybe some of the competitors in our space.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question. I think it's a weird industry because I think, I spent 25-ish years in the business on the creative side, and there definitely were times where you felt very disconnected from what the
Mhm.
core business challenges were. It was simply do the great campaign, do the great ad, and that was fun. Don't get me wrong, I
Yeah,
loved it. Um, but it definitely was not always clear, like to what end. Um, and that tension between agency and client, I mean, it almost seems to be a feature, not a bug, of the relationship sometimes because it's so prevalent that it's like this unnecessarily combative way of being, as opposed to, like you described, more of a we're sitting together,
yeah.
figuring stuff out together.
I I could not agree more with you, and it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
As I've learned over the 20 years of ownership and experienced those relationships with clients, I believe the principle of engaging an agency is to be a part, to engage in something bigger than your own business, to have an
Hmm.
external sphere of influence that inspires you and that third party perspective when you can't see the forest through the trees. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, it should be fun. Working with an agency should be inspirational. It should
Yeah.
be collaborative. It should be creative. It should be
Hmm.
big ideas. If you were brave enough, what would you do? Right. And
Yeah.
having that safe space where I see that tension consistently happen is again when clients don't create that visibility or when they don't create the visibility for clients to be able to see exactly where the time is going and where the money is
Hmm.
going. And so
Yeah.
if what we chose to do is to flip the script and really bring some of those transparent practices up front in early
Mm.
parts of the engagement during our
Oh.
onboarding process, and what that's done is it's yielded a mutual sense of accountability
Mm.
between the agency and the client to not
Mhm.
abuse the time and the money. And it's become a very satisfying kind of construct for how we operate as a firm um, because of that there isn't friction. So then my team stays, right? We have
Mhm.
very low churn.
Yeah.
Happy people do great work. Great week
Mhm.
work turns into happy clients.
Yeah.
And then likewise, we have these incredible relationships with our clients that are turning into multi-year engagements. We have
Mhm.
some clients that have been on our roster for more than a decade,
Wow.
which is very unusual, as you know, in our space since you're our
Yeah.
people.
Mhm.
So it's a formula that we're consistently trying to track to better improve or level up every day. And it's not something that and I'm not speaking poorly to my peer leaders because this is a
Mhm.
very difficult industry, but it's
Yeah.
not something that everybody invests in.
Yeah.
A lot of agencies do go straight to the big idea and maybe not value engineer. Is this going to work for the client? Is this worth the dollars they're investing? Right.
Yeah. And I think because of some of the chaos and a lot of churn in the business and
Hmm.
all that stuff, like a lot of the work with clients is transactional, not relational, and so when I hear you describing 10 plus year, client engagements, I feel like so much more can come from the work when you know, like, trust each other.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Trust is the backbone.
Yeah.
And the more we build that trust and community, um, the pure word agency is defined as such, right?
Hmm.
And when you build trust in your community with clients, the win together, lose together mentality really comes forward.
Hmm.
And so, we're in a very uncertain time right now in our macro, environment
Yeah.
and our economy. And I think that when people are looking at budget considerations and where they can trim on their P&L,
Hmm.
selfishly, I pride ourselves in the fact that it's difficult to cut the James agency from their cost of expense because we are
Hmm.
so invested and our clients do trust us that we have the best interest of their business operations and complexities at heart.
Yeah.
They treat us like an extension of their team
Hmm.
organically versus a third party vendor or contractor, right? So
Hmm.
that's something that I learned being an owner through two downturns. I guess you can call this maybe our third. Nobody's really calling it a
It's,
downturn
I
because
don't know
the
what the
news
heck
is
this is.
controlled,
Yeah.
but let's go ahead and let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Through the 2008, 2009 crash when it was early in the inception of the firm, and then 2020 when we got kicked in the teeth, all of us did.
Hmm.
I learned that building a recession-proof portfolio is, yes, about diversifying your client roster and not having that concentration in one category or asset class, but also building that trust with clients that you're going to see it through with them and making those
Mm.
considerations and being able to be adaptable versus rigid and
Yeah.
functionally linear. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. And, you're describing the client side, and I want to touch on the internal side a little bit
Hmm.
because, again, like I think I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is consistently true, but at one point, the average churn in an agency was like a third every year.
It's bananas.
Like, yeah, a new agency every 3 years, basically. Um, you don't have that as I hear it,
Right.
and I'm curious. So, like, what's it like to work at the James Agency, and what are you doing to help people feel that urge to stick around?
Yeah, thank you. It is truly just a gift, a privilege, and I cannot say it's a byproduct of my sole, discipline and work. As a leader, my chief creative officer has been with me since the jump. My
Mm.
creative director, 14 years.
Wow.
My president is celebrating her 12-year anniversary today.
Mm.
My production director coming up on 11 years. It's very unusual to have a tenured leadership team and that collective, and then the rest of my leadership team is 5, 6, 7 years, right? So they're
Yeah.
sub the decade, but it's very unusual to have in any business, not
Hmm.
just in
Yeah.
industry, but our industry more so, but to have a collective of people who have come from a complex culture or a non-well-oiled machine agency or whatever it may be, and to have a
Hmm.
shared vision of a safe place to work.
Yeah.
And safe place doesn't mean lack of toxicity or drama. I mean, it happens, right? You
Yeah.
you put a bunch of people into a building, it's going to get a little dusty
Of
sometimes,
course.
especially as you grow.
Hmm.
Complexity of business isn't based on revenue; it's based on bodies.
Yeah.
But what we've successfully navigated is, as we've scaled up exponentially, is the ownership of an ethos around safe place to work. And what that means is really around the principle of Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. If you
Hmm.
read that book, an excellent
Yeah.
reference towards like rumbling. We have a process for constructive clearings, and we have a shared commitment to get that on the table within 24 hours. And
Mm.
performance improvement isn't out of punishment; it's out of improvement. Truly, right? We want
Yeah.
people to grow and win, and we, rather than setting it and forgetting it leadership, we have consistent touch points for what we call a huddle cadence, which is every 3 weeks. And we build growth paths and we hold people accountable to goals,
Mm.
personal and professional, which we document. And all of these things I've learned through my journey by proxy of being surrounded by other amazing entrepreneurs and,
Yeah.
consuming as much books and podcasts as I can, like this
Yeah.
one. But it really comes down to the foundation of the leadership and the
Hmm.
shared vision and alignment. And um, a beautiful thing happens when we bring somebody in from outside who's
Hmm.
fresh, who came from another agency, who's well experienced. We have a new director who's been with us for less than a year, and her positive perspective as to how we operate, she just falls right in line. And I think it's
Mm.
healthy to have new perspectives and
Oh yeah.
new bodies at the table to bring and challenge us to make sure that we don't get complacent too.
Hmm.
Sometimes I joke that we're like a 20-year startup. And while we are so documented, we have all of our SOPs in Trainual, which is an amazing software.
Mm.
We have systems and processes up the Yahoo. Like it's
Hmm.
pretty incredible. We're
Yeah.
always looking for ways, always. And I think this is a testament to my leadership team of getting better 1% every day. So turning
Hmm.
those, dials and pulling those levers. And it's the shared commitment of excellence um, that holds everybody accountable to like not phoning it in.
Mm. Yeah. That was, there was a tough period there post COVID where there was that,
Mhm.
whatever, the quiet quitting kind of
Yeah, the Great
syndrome
Resignation was
going
crazy.
on, and the Great Resignation.
Mhm.
I mean, how did you find you weathered that? I mean, were you able to maintain some of what you're talking about here, even in the midst of all those strains in the market?
Well, I call myself an old crusty, and I say that with no disrespect to people in their mid 40s that are in this
Mm.
industry, but I came from everybody's in the building. You get a cot
Mhm.
and a key, work the weekends, work the late nights,
Yep.
right? And I understand we're in a very different generation
Yeah.
of work-life balance and workforce. In full transparency, we did get kicked in the teeth.
Yeah.
In 30 minutes on when COVID hit, we took a 62% net loss.
Oof.
We were highly concentrated in hospitality, food and beverage, and experiential. And as you know, those particular verticals were just crushed, right,
Hmm.
with the closures and the lockdown. And I definitely sat in the swamp for a couple of days. I kind of went to the pity party of like, this is the day I'm going to lose my business. I'll never forget. I was laying on the floor at the time my daughter was 5, and she's like, "Mommy, why are you crying?"
Mm.
And it was a scary time and uncertainty. Nobody knew. There was no playbook for that. Um, my husband owns a business in a completely different space, and he didn't really know how to. He's like, "I've never seen you like this. You're
Mhm.
uncertain." And I'm like, "I know it's very uncharted territory." But
Yeah.
we thought about it and talked about it a lot, and I made the commitment to withhold 100% of our staff, where I know a lot of people were unexpectedly laying off,
Hmm.
60% of their workforce, and so. We did no pay cuts. We didn't do any furloughs or AWOPs, and we did zero layoffs.
Wow.
And that was scary because we did not get the first PPP due to our banks kind of fumble with the portals. And that was a very crazy time as well with technology, as I'm sure you know. But
Oh yeah.
by maintaining some of the same cultural fibers virtually, which is extremely exhausting. We now do
Mhm.
it sort of innately, but at the time, we were doing, rather than doing all hand meetings just every Monday, stand-ups, we called them hustles. We were doing them every morning at 9 a.m. and we would check
Mhm.
in. And then another thing that I did is on Fridays, I would send a scorecard to the whole team. This is where we are with client attrition. This is where we're making it back. This
Mm.
is the expenses that I've cut. These are the decisions. And I think getting in front of it early created a sense of confidence and trust amongst my team.
Yeah.
Facts are friendly, and if you eliminate the uncertainty, which can turn into its own version of a conversation, if you
Hmm.
control that narrative. So I am prideful to say that we maintain the staff. We won some epic accounts that year, navigating pitching virtually and still coming across the table with the same amount of enthusiasm, some,
Mm.
national opportunities, and ending the year only 165,000 in the red.
Wow.
So epic comeback, and being able to honor that. I think that earned myself and our leadership team some badges of honor, of
Mhm.
like, wow, these guys believe in us and they're not going to do whatever it takes to save every dollar.
Yeah.
And I believe confidently, because we are a debt-free agency, that gave us the confidence and the financial
Mm.
rope to be able to do something like that,
Wow.
which is a whole nother podcast we can talk about at another time. So
I'm
um,
very impressed by debt-free companies in general, so I can
thank you.
appreciate that.
Debt is good. Debt is good in some cases, right?
Yeah,
But
for
not when you're
investment
over
purposes,
leveraged.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. But it is impressive, and I know it's not always the case in this business. A theme that's been showing up here in a few different ways with clients, with the internal team, is this idea of transparency. And even kind of showed up there with your scorecard every week and kind of just laying it all out there, like here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing. Um, let's take a look. Where does that come from for you? Like, how did you come to that value, and how do you practice it? Because my experience is that agencies struggle with this a lot, and
Mhm.
it does create sort of those side conversations and the
The
questioning
gray
about,
area.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
how did you get to this place, and how do you kind of hold that?
Yeah. Hold vigil to that. So I can't pinpoint where this came from me on a personal kind of core values level.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of being in EO, Entrepreneurs
Mm,
Organization, for
hmm.
upwards of 15 years.
Yeah.
And likewise, I've been in the same forum. The forum is the smaller group that you're sort of assigned to. They become your personal board of directors, usually
Hmm.
10 people. And so I have some incredible trusted forum mates that have lived more life than I have, or maybe have gone through more complex business scenarios. And,
Mm-hmm.
by proxy of hearing their experience shares, I think that I've, wanted to emulate some of those best practices and, admire the way that they've approached some ethical, matters in an ethical way. To maintain that transparency requires extreme vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
from a leader.
Yeah.
And vulnerability, to me, the definition in a leadership, it doesn't mean that you're incapable or that you don't have you have an inability to do something with confidence. It means that you're feeling empowered to ask for help or to kind of
Mm.
disclose the
Yeah.
situation. I just read the book Open Book Management, or The Great Game of Business, excuse me, about
Mm-hmm.
open book management and bookkeeping and whatnot. And as of January of this year, we have department P&Ls for each of our leaders. So they have full exposure
Yeah.
to our our P&L and our financials, and same principle, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
by becoming vulnerable and exposing that, good and bad, we become a forum together of winning together and losing together and having the conversations not just on the upside but the downside.
Mm-hmm.
And it most certainly puts me in a position where I don't feel like I'm on my own island, because I
Yeah.
think, solopreneurs can often feel like they're, at the top of the totem pole and everybody's saying yes and
Mm-hmm.
maybe not getting challenged, and it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable to be vulnerable. So I could talk about this all day long. So you're welcome to give me the hook anytime. Um, it is an uncomfortable place to be because
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability is healthy conflict,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I like the definition you gave of vulnerability, sort of being empowered to ask for help. I think
Hmm.
as leaders, um, at some point in any career that you get into leadership, you make this transition into leadership and you don't always sort of get the handbook. And part of the assumption we make is we need to look like we know it all, right?
Right.
That somehow to be vulnerable is to look weak. It is to
That's
look like
right.
we don't have the answers, as opposed to what you're describing is no, it's from a position of strength to say, I don't have all the answers and I value my team to help provide those answers. And I think um, when you do that and also sort of open the books as you've had, that creates the kind of trust that then people want to help, I would imagine. Right.
And it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to know the ins and outs of the
Yeah.
business, and
Yeah.
that's okay. That's
Sure.
totally okay.
Yeah.
But I find a tremendous amount of value surrounding myself with people who were, consistently having a thirst for learning and are
Hmm.
inquisitive and
Yeah.
willing to challenge convention. I need that all
Hmm.
the time, as I'm
Yeah.
continuing to try to grow. So yeah, the through line of transparency, I think, is definitely the backbone of how this business has been facing that North Star for a long time.
Mm. Yeah. I also like how your approach to all of this, it's at least one way to solve the thing that I hear a lot from leaders, particularly at the very top of an organization, but maybe anywhere near the top, is sort of there's a loneliness to it of like, I've got this burden all on myself and nobody can really relate. And so by
Hmm.
actually saying like, I'm inviting my team to share in the understanding and empowering them to do something about it. I think that's the key
Hmm.
part about it. Um, it feels like that might make it a little less lonely and a little more like I'm supported in this, and I can, we can all kind of support each other. Has that has that shown up for you?
Totally. I would say that uh, it does alleviate some of that, what keeps me up at night, knowing there's other
Yeah.
people in my corner that are
Mm.
working. I think the one thing I want to sort of punctuate on that statement, though, is when you go to vulnerability and you ask for help, you also need to be comfortable with extreme ownership or accountability.
Oh yeah.
Because when you ask for help and you say, hey, and somebody volunteers or says they're capable, or maybe it's just by de facto their position description to be able to get something done,
Yeah.
you also need to be comfortable with having that hard conversation or
Hmm.
asking why it's not being completed. So there's some complexities there around
Yeah.
trust but verify, transparency, accountability. It's never
Mm-hmm.
like this perfect balance, sometimes it can be a little bit of a wobbly bar stool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's a constant work in progress.
Yeah. Mm. So transparency, accountability. I mean, those certainly sound like pretty core values for you
Yeah.
guys. Are there any other values that show up that you really lean on?
It's pretty interesting here. I'll go pull this little card here.
Okay.
We're really working on a core value initiative right now. So we
Oh, cool.
printed these little cards. And while we've had these cards, we've had these core values for a long time. We want our teams to be able to live by them and to
Mm-hmm.
speak to them. And there's a four-letter word in here, so I won't read the first one, but give a SHIT.
Yeah.
Be yourself, aspire to be better, take action, contribute positivity, challenge convention, and communicate honestly.
Mm.
And we've got some principles around these pillars of how we orient ourselves going back to that safe place to work. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't want people to granted, you can have a bad day. You can come in and kind of just like
Yeah.
fly under the radar, but the power and magnetism that this place brings to our team is, when somebody is truly falling behind to take action and to challenge that convention or whatever it may be. So
Mm-hmm.
we've been initiating a cool MVP monthly program for several years now, but officially this year in 2025, we're honoring an MVP to a core value
Mm.
nominated by the team at large.
Okay.
And it's been really cool to have somebody recognized because of a behavior that aligns with one of these core values and how they embody that. And then the previous MVP from the month prior delivers
Oh,
the kind of
cool.
award or the announcement based on
Mm-hmm.
aggregated feedback that they got from their peers. That's been really cool to see.
Yeah.
And so, we're into May. We just did April's because we do a kind of retroactive MVP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they nail it. One of our designers just got the communicate honestly, and
Mm-hmm.
she truly does. She owns it. She's a junior, but she asks good questions and she brings up when she's stuck, and she's
Mm.
always and it's a beautiful thing. It's really cool to see. So
Yeah, and I can see how there's a lot of interplay between a lot of the values you have and how the transparency plus the safety can create room for the honesty, and even the being yourself, which
yeah,
there's a lot of chatter around people being able to be themselves at work, but you can't just ask it and expect it. You actually have to set sort of the conditions for it.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Mm.
And the James Agency is really well known just as our brand of being a very high performance organization, but
Yeah.
extremely authentic to ourselves. So when you walk in the building, there's at least three dogs and music is blasting. And,
Hmm.
half the time I'm wearing my ripped jeans and,
Hmm.
there's a whole beer fridge upstairs. And those are some of the things that are expected with a creative space. But
Yeah.
clients also understand like, wow, these guys really get stuff done, but
Yeah.
they're also authentically human, and they're not portraying something that they're not. Sure, we'll put on our suits when we need to,
Hmm.
and that's part of the gig too, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that, and I think the fun part of it is an area where a lot of agencies are struggling right now with all of the pressures. It's
Hmm.
like to maintain the fun, which you kind of mentioned this earlier, and I think certainly in my experience, it's sort of the engine of creativity. If you have fun and it creates a looseness, that's when stuff pours
Right.
out of you,
Yep.
right? If you're weighed down and you're not, that's really tough. And I want to touch on something that's often not fun, but I think you guys mentioned on your site, or maybe it's in a blog post, um, RFPs. That is like,
It's like a
just kind
bad
of the,
word in our
it
industry,
really
right?
is, and it's crazy, right? Because it's sort of it's the driver of much of the business that can come through,
Mhm.
but it can be such a brutal, just like horrible experience. And
Very consuming experience. Yes.
yeah, so how do you guys approach it in a way that makes it at least a little more bearable and maybe even at times, kind of enjoyable?
Yeah, first and foremost, for those who don't know what RFP stands for, request for proposal, it is
Hmm.
kind of a bad word in our industry, but just to clarify, I know we
Yeah.
have a lot of acronyms in our
Hmm.
industry.
Hmm.
The negative connotations of RFPs are that clients are kind of doing this casting call or this cattle call to size up for their next agency selection. And that can be very difficult, especially when a procurement manager is the one navigating that process and they don't truly understand the
Hmm.
industry or what they're asking for. We do make light of that. Sometimes we read these RFPs and we're like, clearly this person has never worked in marketing and has no
Hmm.
idea.
Yeah.
So, we're always challenging convention and trying to ask those questions and whatnot. I have a pretty amazing business development team, and we, again, have a very strong process around this. We treat this in an integrated fashion where we do pull in a lot of our subject matters experts and we create a central repository for communication and ideation. And lately, we've been using AI to discern whether an opportunity is valid for us to move forward with. Because
Mm.
to your point, the consumption of time during RFP season can be pretty expensive from an agency resource perspective. So, building a couple chat GPT, we built our own GPT around verifying against a scorecard and our case
Oh, that's
studies
cool.
and deconstructing our, if it can find information about the current agency, how do we deconstruct that? Not 100% my idea. I'm in a national EO forum as well. A
Mm.
gentleman is doing this, and
Nice.
it's pretty cool. It's working really well, and it's kind of scoring on a 0 to 35,
Okay.
and whether we should move forward with positivity. So that shortens the do we go forward or not mile, which is really
Hmm.
helpful.
Yeah.
And then bringing people along. I have a lot of phrases. My team kind of hates it because I got a lot of them. One of the ones that I'm consistently hammering is many hands make for light work.
Okay.
That's actually my dad's phrase. And something can feel extraordinarily heavy from like an agency lift, but when you put a plan together and you sort of pre-mortem the heck out of it of all the things that
Hmm.
could go wrong and you
Yeah.
you eat the elephant in bite sizes, it really doesn't feel
Yeah.
as consuming or overwhelming as it needs
Hmm.
to. And you just need a quarterback to run the steps. So we project manage RFPs just like we do client
Yeah.
projects.
Mm.
And by applying the same methodology that we would from a performance excellence perspective for our clients based on non-negotiable deliverables and quality of work and showing up for our part.
Hmm.
Um, it, I can't say it makes it awesome, but it definitely makes it better. And
Yeah. It makes
there's
it
there's a
not suck.
seasonality. Usually Q1 and Q3 are those heavy RFP lifts.
Yeah.
Um, and we're seeing a pretty significant increase in those. And I think it's because of the macro economy right now, and people
Hmm.
are maybe being a little more scrupulous with their current agency partnership.
Yeah.
Just a little word to anybody who's listening out there that's doing an RFP: keep them simple, ask for what you want. Realize that a 200-page submission and spec work is pretty exhausting for an agency. And if they don't
Hmm.
win, it can actually leave a really bad taste in their mouth. So,
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
yeah.
I think that that voice wants to be spread far and wide, and I think other agencies would appreciate that that does get spread far and wide. One thing that I think you mentioned in your perspective online is like, you know, companies will come with such a like down to the dot prescription for what they're looking for. And you say something like, close enough can be enough, meaning like
Mhm.
you don't have experience. I think you said something like, we don't, if you don't have experience in hotels that were founded in 1956 or something like that, like you might still get it because you've worked in that space before, including ones that are maybe not brand new. Like,
Right.
how does that, how do you navigate that? Because it feels so prescriptive when it comes at you. Like, how do you create the conversation to get to close enough and be okay with that on their end?
Yeah, unfortunately, in the RFP process, as you know, the conversation doesn't happen until the third phase. You have to
Yeah.
make it past that procurement manager. We did
Mm-hmm.
an interesting, we actually did one of our own. We have our strategy process is called Stratagem.
Mm-hmm.
We did a stratagem for TJA back in January where we started interviewing friendly procurement managers that we had worked with. I think we talked with six, and we asked them for, what are you looking for when you're comparing 10 RFPs and
Yeah.
agencies? And um, you're right. They do look for exact line of experience.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's very difficult for agencies to break into a new category, even
Hmm.
though the formula or the application of the relevant work experience probably mirrors exactly what they're looking
Yeah.
for. So what we heard from procurement managers is like, make it easy for us to understand that
Mm.
you get it. Don't just say, "Oh, we did something like this." May
Hmm.
not be exact, but actually spell it out. They need black and white.
Mm.
Make it as easy as possible to say, and here's why this matches.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, as an agency, when we're submitting our relevant experience, we forget that, again, procurement managers don't
Yeah.
they're not able to read between the lines or connect
Hmm.
those dots. So
That's
the
fair.
simpler, the better.
Yeah.
But we've experienced that. There are times where we felt like we were a shoo-in and we knew exactly what the ask was for. And maybe we weren't experts for 15 years in high performance race car, experiential, but man, that ask and that scope of work is something we've been doing with excellence for the past 10 years and we don't get it. And
Yeah.
and that's okay. It's just
Hmm.
kind of how it goes.
Yeah, it is. It is how it goes. I think, on some level, there's this wish underneath it that there could be some knowledge sharing and training in the procurement space
Yep.
to to get to a much higher level of understanding of what the businesses are doing and what the
Mhm.
agencies are doing, and start to learn how to connect those dots and read between those lines a little better. Maybe wishful thinking, I don't know, but I
Maybe that's your next podcast series, right?
it could
Education
be.
for procurement managers. No, I agree. And that's just the name of the game. How long has it been? 50 something years that
Yeah.
process has maintained. Will
Hmm.
it change with AI and,
Yeah.
inductive learning and being able to, maybe so.
Yeah, it could.
We'll see. So,
So one other thing that I think you mentioned online that I was intrigued by is the sort of making the shift for younger talent. And this is an issue, or at least a concern, that shows up with a lot of folks I speak with at the leadership level in our business. Like, talent can often come in and they have certain great skills, but they just don't get what agency life is like and what it is. So, like, you go through a marketing program or a communications program or an advertising program and you learn the stuff, but you show up and you're kind of naive on the, like, what is this really going to look like?
right.
You even mentioned sort of the terminology and just the ebb and flow of the hours and the new business and all that stuff. Um, how do you navigate that? And do you think there's room for on the school side for there to
Mm.
be kind of more of a collaboration with agencies to get a better grip on that?
I do, and I'm already seeing a progressive movement like GCU and ASU. A lot of the local schools are starting to teach more of the psychology of the business. You
Mm,
hit it on the head. There's been a really strong foundation of tactics, and
yeah.
but the reality is you know clients are hard. That's the unknown. And they don't
Mhm.
teach that. They teach you
Yeah.
how to execute, but deadlines moving and critiques coming through with uncertain, direction. And so the psychology business is challenging. And look, that incoming workforce age group hadn't hasn't really been set up for success. If you think about it,
Yeah.
they entered college and the world shut down, so they didn't
Mhm.
have the opportunity to have interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
Everything was done on a two-dimensional platform. That's not how our industry thrives. We all know it. While Zoom is fantastic and it
Hmm.
allows us to be very efficient in real life, is the foundation of creativity with
Hmm.
clients and not just creativity, strategy, planning, all those things.
Yeah.
And they haven't had that experience, so they get entered into the workforce, whether it's a hybrid environment, and I know a lot of agencies are going back to that, where
Hmm.
Mondays everybody in the office, and then Tuesday through Friday people can pick 2 days to work from home, so 3 days
Okay.
essentially in the office.
Hmm.
We see productivity ebb and flow based on where we are in our seasonality of business, but I
Hmm.
definitely see quality of output stronger when the collective team is working together in person. So,
Yeah.
so I think that, that's going to be an interesting thing that we'll have to watch for.
Mm-hmm.
The further, more rearview mirror COVID becomes and people are being forced to interact, the psychology of the industry is definitely a gap in the
Mm.
learning. And
Yeah.
I remind my young staff members, like, it's okay that you don't get it yet.
Yeah.
Like, give yourself some grace because they
Mm-hmm.
kind of walk into the environment and they're like, holy smokes, no
Yeah.
one warned me that, like,
Mm-hmm.
deadlines aren't a semester. Deadlines can be 2 hours,
Yes.
and you've got approval by committee, and emails are
Mm-hmm.
flying, and a director's telling you that the client's wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't teach you that. So,
Yeah. I do like, I mean, the psychology of the business is a really interesting way of looking at it. And
right.
I love that schools are trying to pick up on that. And, you know, it feels like at some point, internships are good, but it's almost like something else. I don't know what the collaboration is, but a way of just giving people a chance to, like you said, like be in it,
Yep.
like get dropped into it for even just a week, or in the course of a semester, to just kind of start to feel it. Or you know can they model their own in-house little agencies that they're creating at schools, and not overprotect,
Hmm.
like give it the real thing in it. And I don't know how often that happens, but it would be really interesting to
I
see.
agree. I
Yeah,
agree because it is a pressure cooker, and
it is. Yeah.
it's not for the faint of heart. This industry is really hard.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to perform on a dime even when you're not feeling awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to
Yeah.
come in with confidence, even when the client's kind of pushing at you. And that's not stuff that they teach you or kind of lean to. And I think that incoming workforce would have a stronger association if that happened, like you said, but also they may elect out before they decide
Yeah, and that's
to.
okay too, right? Like
That's
if they
totally,
know it's not for them, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think better to know
right.
the
We've
reality.
had we do an apprenticeship program versus an internship
Oh, I
program.
like
So
that.
it's a
Yeah.
paid engagement where they're actually working on client work. It's a
Hmm.
90-day program. It's very successful. Some people inevitably become, part of our full-time staff at the end of their journey. But
Hmm.
we always do an exit interview at the end. And I can tell you that over 50% say, I had no idea, and this is probably not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think that's okay. Some businesses are less chaotic and less up and down, and like others, they want that. Others thrive in that.
Right.
You want the surprise and delight that you can experience in the
That's right.
chaos
That's
sometimes.
right.
Um, I want to get us closer to wrapping up. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
One, I just real quick, you've talked about some of the ways you've helped kind of make the work experience better at your place. Like, what is one change that anyone can do right now to make work better, whether they're running a business or maybe they're in a business and they don't know how to make it more kind of work for them?
Yeah, I can only speak to the professional services side.
Yeah.
I don't oversee robots or
Yeah.
manufacturing, but for me, I think one thing is really leaning into your people. I think right
Hmm.
now, more than ever, people need certainty of intent and clarity of vision. And so,
Mm-hmm.
as a leader, being able to lean into that and having those connections. I have a professional strategic coach, and she told this really great story. I'll make it abbreviated, but she said that one time she went and picked up her son from school. He was 5 or 6 at the time. And the principal said, "Bye, Hudson. Have a good day." And she immediately thought Hudson was in trouble because the principal said, "Why does she know your name? Why is she
Mm.
saying that?" And the 6-year-old said, "Mom, that's her job. She's our principal." So
Mm.
the principal, intimately knows all 5 or 600 of
Mm.
her people. That's her job. And similarly, I think, at one point when you're running an enterprise, that's very difficult to do, but
Sure.
leaning into people and deeply understanding their needs, wants, vision for
Mm.
themselves, professional path is something that I think people crave right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I told you I do executive coaching work now, and like that is like you're singing off of my song sheet right there. I mean,
Okay,
that,
cool.
that is that
Awesome.
is the mission. I mean, when I talk about desuckifying work, I think that is the way towards it.
Mhm.
So I love that. I know I've asked you a few questions. I'd love to give you a chance to ask our audience a question. Do you have anything you'd like to put to them?
Yeah, I always love to ask this question is what is the one thing that you'd ask your younger self
Mm.
Now, knowing what you know about your business or where you are in your professional career, because hindsight is always 2020. I think that people consistently are, I want more, I want bigger. And then you look
Mm.
back and you're like, oh, wow, it was so much fun. We were just 10 people in that little boiler room style
Yeah.
office, and that
Hmm.
reflection. So I love asking that question. I think it's hard and deep. And so, like, what's one thing you wish you could tell yourself,
Oh, I like that.
your younger self?
Yeah, it's a good exercise. Mm.
Mhm.
So, if you could wave a magic wand and create a world of work that's just fully desuckified, everybody really enjoys it. What does that world look like?
Oh my gosh, that's such a loaded question. I mean, the reality is professional services is extremely biased and subjective, right?
Yeah.
And the intellectual property is the ideas and
Hmm.
the quality of service. Yeah,
Hmm.
I wish people in any space played honest.
Yeah.
I think honesty and playing competitive is one thing, playing dirty is another.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
if I could sort of unravel some of the complexities that we go up against and desuckify our spaces, leveling the playing field around ethical
Mm.
businesses and ethical ownership. Yes, it might be a slower, sluggish way to grow, but it would
Hmm.
just make things less hard,
I
you know.
agree. Yeah, I love that.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So I'm gonna ask. I ask people to do a sound effect on this show. It's part of the intro, and there's always some sounds. You have anything you want to share? It could be a sound. It could even be one of your sayings that you like to throw out.
Gosh, I got prefaced this yesterday when I got the pregame. I don't know if I have a sound. I think one of the things that my leadership team jokes about is whenever we go on a tangent in a meeting, like an L10 meeting, we go meow meow, and it's like this unspoken permission to call somebody out by going meow meow, and I was like, oh, sorry, I went on a tangent. No problem. And it's totally approachable and okay. Like
Yeah.
nobody gets offended by that. But my saying that I'm always saying is win the game before the game.
Mm.
Win the game. You think about all the athletes and the business owners and the 1%, they
Hmm.
walk the track before the race, they
Yeah.
set up the conference room and practice before the pitch. Like, just win the game before the game, and
Mm.
and here's my other one is consistency is the king or queen of success. Embrace the freaking mundane.
Yeah. Mm.
If you're constantly moving your goalpost every 6 months, you're never going to be the 1%.
Oof.
So
Oh, I like that one. That one.
yeah.
There's a lot of th- that happening in the agency world. I'll just say.
So much, especially within that younger workforce. They're
Yeah.
expecting accelerated growth paths. They want to
Yeah.
be at a senior leadership. You got
Hmm.
to do the work. You got to win the
Yeah.
game before the game. You got to be consistent.
Yeah.
You kind of got to embrace some of the basics and
Yeah.
really just dominate the early part of your career before
Hmm.
you can expect to be, at the top of the totem pole.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing people ask me is like, why are you where you are today? And it's because I embraced the mundane. I stuck
Hmm.
to it. I had one
Yeah.
goal that I was consistently digging into. And the most amazing business owners that I have the privilege of knowing are obsessed with the details. They
Yeah.
pay attention. Details matter,
Yeah.
right?
No, I love that. I love all those sayings. I think they're great. I love the
Thank
cat
you.
sound. I'm a giant cat fan, so I use cat sounds as well. So that one will definitely find its
Okay,
way into our intro. Um,
cool.
the last question is just how can people find you and learn more about all the good work you're doing?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So our website is thejamesagency.com. We'll be launching a new one this year, so keep an eye out for that. We're in the process of that. And then on
Awesome.
all social handles at the James Agency, at the James Agency. Instagram is very much our culture, a lot of our work. LinkedIn will obviously be some of our wins and our case studies.
Hmm.
But we welcome our community to have conversations with us. And of course, just give us a call, drop in.
Yeah.
We love that. We love having that in real life communication.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you, V, for
Thank you.
showing up and giving us a little insight into your world.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the Desuckify Work podcast. And a huge thanks to Veronique for bringing bright ideas and business savvy to the show. You can follow Veronique on LinkedIn and check out her agency's site at thejamesagency.com. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to dive deep into some of your own challenges at work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session where we can explore new desuckified possibilities for your future. Bye, everyone.